Okay, we are all set. So, hello and welcome to the Sisters Bonded in Action webinar series. I'm Ayana Young. Throughout this series, we'll continue to dive into the systemic issues that permeate the dominant paradigm we find ourselves in. As a culture, we're awakening to the ways in which the status quo doesn't serve us and will not allow for future generations to flourish. From the mass extinction crisis to climate change to deep-seated injustice, there is much to collectively engage and mobilize around. Yet, in order to make this change, we must first educate ourselves. We must build relationships based on true solidarity and with integrity. I don't sit here with all the answers, but with an open mind and heart, eager to learn every step of the way. And I want to express my gratitude for the audience and for your willingness to just join us in this journey and sit in these questions. And as we dig deep into these sensitive and critical topics, I look forward to hearing your thoughts and questions throughout this webinar. And please feel free to ask your questions at the end or throughout, and we'll be able to actually bring you on the screen so that you can ask Jade and Lila directly. And as we're diving into these topics of decolonization and indigeneity, and in order to build the foundations of our collective resistance, we must first and foremost honor the original inhabitants of the land we walk upon. You know, we must admit that the genocide and oppression of Indigenous peoples is the bedrock of this country. And yet, despite these relentless attempts to destroy and assimilate, Native people have continually shown what it means to be resilient. Now more than ever, we will be guided by the Indigenous wisdom of this land, as it is much older and much more deeply rooted than the infant nation that is America. Indigenous leaders should be at the center of our movements of resistance, and those of us coming from places of privilege should do all that we can to uplift their voices. So today we are lucky enough to talk to two young leaders, Jade Begay and Lyla June, on decolonizing and reclaiming indigeneity. Jade Begay is a descendant of Diné lineage, and she is a social impact filmmaker and multimedia artist based in Santa Fe, New Mexico. She is deeply committed to amplifying Indigenous and marginalized voices and works to help bring forth real solutions from within these communities to achieve ecological balance. Jade's most recent work has been done in partnership with the Indigenous Environmental Network, 350.org, Resource Media, and several other organizations. Lyla June was raised in Taos, New Mexico, and is a descendant of Diné and Cheyenne lineages. Her personal mission in life is to grow closer to Creator by learning how to love deeper. In 2012, she graduated with honors from Stanford University with a degree in environmental anthropology. She is a musician, public speaker, and internationally recognized performance poet. Lyla June ultimately attributes any achievements to Creator, who gave her the tools and resources she uses to serve humanity. She currently lives in Diné, the Navajo ancestral homeland, which spans what is now called New Mexico, Colorado, Utah, and Arizona. She spends her free time learning her endangered mother tongue, planting corn, beans, and squash, and spending time with elders who retain traditional spiritual and ecological knowledge. Wow. Hello, Jade and Lila. Thank you so much for being with us in this webinar.
Thanks for having us. It's an honor to be here.
Yeah, thanks so much, Ayana.
Wonderful. So I want to start off by just dissecting colonialism. In light of Standing Rock, the mainstream has begun to awaken to the reality of current Indigenous issues, especially in this country. But for much of the American public, the word colonialism remains associated with whitewashed tales of America's beginnings, you know, depicted in children's textbooks or in the description of a picturesque historic tourist town on the eastern seaboard. But domination, and in America's case, genocide, is inherent in the definition of the word colonialism. And many of us have long recognized the early colonial forces, the brutal massacres, the violent removal of thousands of people from their traditional homelands, such as the infamous Trail of Tears, and laws prohibiting the expression of culture, among countless other examples. And this directly and aggressively dehumanized the original brothers and sisters of this land, not to mention the land itself. Yet the fact that the repressive and exploitative exertions of colonialism have never subsided, that they've only shifted in their manifestations, is a truth that's less widely acknowledged. So I'm wondering, could you describe what colonialism means in today's culture? And what are some examples of how colonialism endures in the modern day?
It's all you, Jade.
All right, I was just waiting for the green light. So quickly, I just wanted to, Ayana, you mentioned this earlier, starting with an opening on recognizing the original peoples of the land we're on. That's a practice I try to bring into any space I go into, and I do a lot of traveling for work, so it's an opportunity for me to learn who the people are and just give gratitude and recognition to them. So right now I'm in New Orleans, Louisiana, and this is the land of the Homa and the Chitimacha. And so I just want to honor those people and give gratitude for the way they are still stewarding this land, and for welcoming me and countless others here. So with this question, so many things, but the big one that comes to mind is extraction. Extraction of resources from our Mother Earth, mining, coal, drilling into the land, fracking, offshore drilling, the whole extraction industry is one of the biggest forms of colonialism that I see play out. I work on these issues daily, and environmental, so this is kind of at the forefront of what I am seeing. And the extraction industry really exists at the expense of sacred lands and indigenous peoples and our paradigms. I think another way we see colonialism play out, and I bring this up because it's sort of relative right now with, for those of us who work in the environmental world, the People's Climate March is coming up in a couple weeks, a month, I should say, and climate change. That's a way colonialism is playing out, and we might not make that connection, but I guess that's why we're here, to make those connections. In the IEN community, we have this saying, and it's on our banners when we show up in different spaces to resist, but it's stop CO2 colonialism. And what we mean by this is that the people who are causing climate change and who deny it do not experience the impacts of climate change. Therefore, it's easy for them to continue to build pipelines or put more carbon in the atmosphere, or to not tax carbon outputters. But there's a direct relationship between colonialism and those who are on the front lines of climate change. The frontline communities of climate change are, of course, the more vulnerable communities and the poorest communities, so indigenous folks and Black and brown folks. So that's, one other large scale way that I see colonialism play out. Let's see. Lila, do you want to add a couple? I know that's a big question, and I think we can just piggyback off of what each other say, but I mean, there's so many different ways, and I just wanted to highlight those two big ones that I'm currently working on and that are just sort of like, you know, coming out of Standing Rock. Like, those are the big ones that are right in front of all of us, I should say.
Yeah. Shade, thank you, sister. I'll do what Jade did just to practice this. I'm sitting at the base of Sandia Mountains in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And this is the original homeland, the sacred mountain of the Sandia Pueblo. And they call this mountain Bien Mer, Big Mountain. And it's a really gorgeous, life-sustaining mountain. There's also Isleta Pueblo and Santa Ana Pueblo nearby. So I'm a Navajo lost in the Pueblo land. But I'll also introduce myself and just say my people, my kin, where the sky kisses the earth. I'm the Black Charcoal Street Clan, Lyla June Johnston. My name's Lyla June, Taos, New Mexico. Taos, New Mexico is where I'm from. Now I'm living in Albuquerque. So now that I have those important formalities finished, the question was, you know, how does colonialism endure to this day? Wow, you know, that's a big question, and it's amazing that you even asked that question, Ayana, because I think one of the ways that colonialism endures today is that there's still a denial of what happened and is happening. Sometimes it's a conscious denial. Sometimes it's a learned denial that we just kind of grow up with. But I'm really grateful also for the way you opened up this whole thing, Ayana. I was like, wow, it was just music to my ears for you to just witness what this country is founded on. Because not all the time do people take the time to say, yeah, this is what we're built on. And it's not fun, but it's true. And I think the sooner we can have the courage and the love and the forgiveness to look at that truth in a real way, is the sooner we can actually have a real life as a country instead of just kind of living in a fantasy that's not really real. But I think one of the ways that, you know, comes up for me is that we have to understand that the first group to be colonized was actually European indigenous peoples. With the Roman expansion and the witch hunts, you actually have 6 to 9 million women being persecuted as witches. They were burned alive, drowned alive, raped alive, beaten, tortured, dismembered alive. And so these women were sort of on the front lines of colonization of Europe. And in the 1920s, actually, you could be humiliated and punished for speaking the Welsh language in Wales. So I see the colonization of Turtle Island really as a perpetuation of the colonization of Europe, which is very, very real, and we often forget to acknowledge that. Because you don't just wake up one day and say, hey, I feel like committing genocide on a whole continent of people. You know, that doesn't happen. It comes from somewhere. The urge to dominate, the fear that gives rise to the urge to dominate, is all having its root in the destruction of indigenous European quote unquote witches. But these were actually the medicine women of Europe who knew all the sacred knowledge. And so that's one thing, how colonialism endures, you know, to go back. And who knows what caused the Romans to do that? You know, maybe it goes back to Egypt. I don't know. I've only gotten as far as the witch hunts. I don't know. I haven't gotten deeper than that yet. But I like to acknowledge that, because then it helps us see, okay, you know, there's a reason for all of this. If you have 9 million women getting burned alive and drowned alive and all kinds of crazy stuff, that's the kind of terror that can cause this type of colonization. And the last thing I'll say is today, we eat, sleep, and breathe colonization, because like the proverbial fish in the water, we are so deep in it, we don't even know how deep in it we are. But if you think about it, everything from the way we eat, to the history that we teach, to the way that we get around, transportation, to the voices that are represented in the media and are not, is getting a lot better. You know, we are making baby steps here and there. But the big thing that comes up for me, since I'm kind of in the education field, is education. I mean, walk into any public school, and like Michael Apple said, he's a professor at University of Michigan, he says, why are these the core classes? And why is Navajo language extracurricular? Why is chemistry the core class instead of knowing how to run a sweat lodge, which is its own form of chemistry? Why are all of these disciplines marginalized, and all of these other, you know, maths and sciences and histories, which are direct outsprings of a Eurocentric paradigm, why are these what kids get rewarded for? And so the entire education system is just one big manifestation and outgrowth of colonialism and hegemony, not only of indigenous peoples, but also of African American traditions that, you know, had their own paradigms and their own teachings, and of Asian American paradigms that had their own teachings, all of which gets pushed aside. And furthermore, it's a suppression of the ancient European teachings, which were all about the goddess, which were all about honoring the feminine, which were all about honoring the spirit of the earth. And so we're all losing out. It's not like white people, so to speak, are winning in this. We're all losing out because we're all being disconnected from the mother and from the spirit.
You're about to take myself off mute. Yeah. Thank you both so much for that description of colonialism, and both of your work, which I know is dedicated to decolonization and to helping reclaim this way of knowing that many people are losing in this globalized system. And as we've collectively begun to dissect the effects of America's violent and unjust colonial foundations, the journey towards its dismantling or decolonization unfolds. Many of us have heard the term decolonization, but to dig deep into what that actually means or looks like is hard work. You know, as the colonializer mindset has seeped its way into the very fabric of our society and internal psychologies, there must be the decolonization of our political institutions, of our scientific research, of our community structures, and so on and so forth. And I'm wondering, how can we not only begin to decolonize the political framework of the dominant paradigm, but also of our hearts and of our minds?
How can we decolonize our hearts and our minds? Wow, that's poetic. Well, I think that for me, as an Indigenous woman, well, I'm actually almost half European, actually. So I have both going on. But I was raised to kind of see things from a Diné and Lakota perspective. But as a Native woman, I was trained from birth to be more on the militant side. to disdain the colonizer, to humiliate the colonizer at any opportunity, to set myself apart and against the colonizer. And so I didn't realize this whole time growing up that that disdain and that humiliating others and that hatred and that division of myself against humanity was a colonized form of behavior. And so it gets very tricky very quickly to decolonize your heart. It's a, I want to say it's a wonderful process because it involves cleansing yourself of the same hatred that destroyed your people. And so over time, and you and I talked about this, Ayana, last week, but I met with Desmond Tutu, who was a head of the Truth and Reconciliation Council in South Africa. And he talked about forgiveness. And I swear I'll never be the same since hearing him speak of forgiveness. And how do we as all peoples, whether we have a deep legacy in this continent, or maybe we have a deep legacy in Africa or Australia or Eurasia or Asia or Southeast Asia or Europe, wherever our wherever our deep legacy rests, part of decolonizing ourselves, and again, European Americans are no exception, they also need to decolonize because they themselves have been colonized by the Roman expansion and other forces. To me, decolonizing the heart is falling back in love with Mitako e Oyasin, falling back in love with all my relations. This means that I can no longer partake in the hatred of the colonizer. This means that I must pray for the colonizer as a younger brother or a younger sister who has not yet matured into the state of mind that sees themselves as connected to all things, that sees themselves as a servant of the earth, not a dominator of the earth, that sees themselves as a grateful child of creation instead of an entitled child of creation, that sees themselves as someone who can truly feel through their heart even the most smallest messages that the earth is trying to give us. Those are the people who need our prayers the most. And admittedly, I haven't gotten to that state either, so I pray for myself too. But to move from a state of disdain, which a lot of us Native Americans fall into, it's very easy, and you can't hardly blame them when you've been just like had everything you have like ripped away from you, when you've had your women systematically raped, when you've been incarcerated for years at a time, when you've been marched thousands of miles. It's understandable, or in the case of Acoma Pueblo, you've had every man in your village have his left foot chopped off. This is the kind of stuff people went through. So you can hardly blame people for not remaining in that loving, forgiving state. And at the same time, we as Indigenous peoples lose out when we are duped into hatred, because then we get assumed into that same blob of hatred that killed us in the first place, and we become the colonizer. And in many ways we have lots of incest in our communities, lots of alcoholism, lots of domestic violence, lots of perpetuation of unsustainable food systems. And this is not because we're bad people. It's because all of our grandparents were raped in boarding schools, and all of our communities had barrels of whiskey imported into them. And so we have become colonizers of ourselves even. And so to me, to truly decolonize the heart and to decolonize the mind is to fall back in love with all beings and all things. And that's not easy at first, but the more that we love in the face of hatred, the easier it gets. And so it's a practice, it's a constant practice. And a lot of our ancestors were able to do it. Like Zarquillos Largos, he was a Diné medicine man who always prayed for the US agents and the Spanish, or Talbot, who refused to lift a weapon during Sand Creek Massacre. There's lots of Indigenous ancestors who followed the peace path instead of the war path. But I'll stop talking there, but I think that's basically what I would have to say about that.
Thank you, Lila. That was an incredible response to that question. And Jade, I'd love to hear your thoughts as well about decolonizing our political framework, our hearts and our minds, or whichever direction you'd like to take it in.
Thank you, Ayana. And thank you, Lila, for going into that and really covering the heart piece and the prayer piece. I think, you know, like exactly like how we opened, it's that in itself is just a huge part of decolonizing. And I think for me, you know, Lila I thought that was a good way to go into just, you know, talking about how we were raised. And for me, I wasn't really taught the same way, you know, to be militant or to, you know, view the colonizer as the bad person. I was kind of raised with a more kind of assimilating perspective that, you know, it wasn't, I didn't really need to question it. So when I started to, you know, in my teens and then, you know, in these past 10 years or so, I should say, I guess the process of decolonization for me has just been questioning everything, questioning, you know, like we did early on the call, who are the original peoples of this land? I found myself, you know, as an Indigenous person, I guess it felt wonky to not know that answer within a century, and it was my fault, really. But like Lila pointed out, that's not something we learn in our schools. Even I went to a BIA school on the res. We didn't learn that. So for me, it's questioning everything. And I think that is something that, you know, we can do sort of on the micro level to decolonize, you know, whether it's that simple question of who are the original peoples of this land, who, you know, who is this national park really named after? Is it a general that was someone who actually killed thousands of Indigenous peoples? Probably that happens a lot, and yeah, that's true for a lot of national parks and a lot of national monuments or what have you. But you know, these types of questioning, you know, the status quo, I think we can do a lot more of that. I think you know, we talked about, or Lila mentioned language. You know, I think it's really funny how when we go abroad, we learn the simple greetings like hello and goodbye and thank you, just to be cordial. So why don't we do that here? Why don't we try to learn Diné or Lakota or Homa, you know, whatever the language is where we're at, to show respect, and to, if we meet an Indigenous person from there, we can greet them. I think those are some of the small, I mean, they're not small, they're big, because then it trains our mind, because what we're really doing when we're decolonizing is we're really retraining and relearning and yeah, having our brain think in a way that it's not been trained to think in. You know, again, I thought that statement was so powerful. We eat, breathe, and sleep, or whatever it was, colonialism. So, yeah, just really questioning everything. And then I think, you know, politically, that's a really tough question, because, you know, as much as I would love to see this whole paradigm shift, I'm also a bit of a realist, and you know, with this current administration, that you know, having the U.S. government, you know, recognize Indigenous rights or honor treaties, that kind of seems impossible with the current political situation. In fact, Trump is looking to privatize tribal lands, and that's not a good thing. I'll just go on record and just say, you know, that's a whole nother webinar, so we won't go into that, but just you'll see headlines about that, and that's not a good thing. So, you know, I think politically, it's tough, and that's why we need to continue to show support to the grassroots movements that are taking place and the resistances that are happening all over Turtle Island. Oh man, I'm in Louisiana right now, and the Bayou Bridge pipeline, which is the end of the Dakota Access Pipeline and also made by Energy Transfer Partners, that's another resistance that needs so much support. So, you know, I think we as local small communities, we can do more work in learning and in decolonizing and in trying to heal some of the colonialism that's, you know, harmed a lot of these communities.
Thank you, Jade. I love that question, everything, and also these not easy steps, but relatively simple steps to start learning how to respect the original peoples of this land and how to get involved locally and supporting the grassroots organizations that are truly the ones on the ground, seeing, witnessing, experiencing, dealing with the atrocities that are happening from resource extraction and environmental racism and so on and so forth. So thank you so much for being there right now. And you know, I know a lot of your work has been so powerful and, you know, symptomatic of European colonialization and imperialism worldwide has been this persistent silencing of Indigenous voices. And still today, the stories of Native people are told through the eyes of the settler, whether it be anthropological accounts of plant uses or cultural practices or white photographers profiting off of the struggles of Indigenous nations and what they continue to face. So Jade, much of your work centers around empowering people to tell their own stories and the amplification of Indigenous voices. So I'm wondering if you could talk a bit about extractive storytelling and the importance of Indigenous media makers today.
Yeah, definitely. And I want to answer the question and make space for Lyla to talk about that too, because she's also a media maker. So extractive storytelling, it's kind of this term that's been used in the Indigenous community and also the POC community. But basically, it's when, I mean, and it has its roots in anthropology, the way, you know, like you mentioned, how our stories were taken and told by other people. So, you know, someone coming into a community and not really building a relationship, not really getting immersed or building trust, but, you know, parachuting in, grabbing their, you know, headline story or their really sensationalized story, and then taking off, and that story serving, you know, that magazine or that, you know, making someone's, you know, I guess, quota for reporting but not benefiting the community where the story happened. And we see that all the time with media. You know, a bright and shiny example is Standing Rock, and how media really didn't come to Standing Rock until the violence started happening. And, you know, things really start, I mean, the DAPL project was happening years before, or plans and talks about DAPL were happening years before 2016. And then the camp started in April, and, you know, the media didn't show up till late mid-October, when the dogs started attacking, when they brought out the dogs, and when Amy Goodman got attacked by North Dakota, you know, and was scrutinized for doing her job. So, you know, this is feeding a colonial narrative that we are victims, and that's really what the media was focusing on, that, you know, we're victims and we're getting harmed, and these protesters are causing all this ruckus, instead of, wow, look at these like resilient Native people who are protecting their water for future generations. Look at these young people who are, you know, that was coming out, but more through social media, more through our own storytelling. If you look at, you know, the media that was being put up by North Dakota and some more mainstream, again, it was perpetuating this colonial narrative. So that's why Indigenous storytelling is so important, that we counter those narratives, and that we can tell our own story for once, and encourage our people, and our young people especially, that our stories matter and that our stories are beautiful and important. Another way that colonialism has endured, and we mentioned it a little bit with education systems, is erasure. You know, our leaving our histories out of the history books, and leaving our narratives out of everything. You know, that leaves a mark, and that kind of tells us that, you know, we're not important. The history that we have is not important. So with reclaiming our narratives and reclaiming our stories and telling them ourselves, we're countering erasure, and we're doing just that. We're just, you know, this, I always say that Indigenous storytelling is resistance in itself. And so, you know, I'm repeating myself, but it's countering erasure, and it's showing our people that our stories matter. Lila, do you want to speak a bit on why Indigenous media is so important?
Yeah. Well, a lot of what I have been seeing throughout the social media, the rise of the social media age, I guess you could say, is more and more Indigenous peoples taking hold of the camera, taking hold of the pen, taking hold of editing software, taking hold of even just things like simple as tweeting, but also recognizing the deep lineage that we come from of storytellers. John Trudell, you know, who was storytelling long before Facebook and YouTube existed. Leslie Silko, author of Ceremony. Lots of different Indigenous peoples, and if you go back even further, you know, the ones who really set the record straight during the height of violence against Indigenous peoples, which well, maybe not the height, but the height that we remember, I guess you say, is the late 1800s. And you have people like Seattle, I'm sure I'm mispronouncing that. You have people like Zarquios Largos, you have people like Sitting Bull, different folks who are able to articulate who and what we are. And people say, oh, don't romanticize Native Americans as these perfect da-da-da. But we did have wisdom, and we do have wisdom that we shared at a time when two paradigms were colliding. And so I think, you know, social media has been a whole nother epic of Indigenous storytelling. And obviously I do it a lot through poetry and through music. And so creating music videos, you know, I'm just this random girl from New Mexico, you know, and I put out this, you know, video, just normal one day, and it got like 2 million views. And it's like, oh, okay. Or I was like sitting at Sacred Stone Camp the other day, and I just was like, you know what, I just gotta say something. This was when they were pulling people out of the camps, and just pulling elders out of the camps, and it was just this horrible, sad day. And I just declared victory for Standing Rock that day. I said, we've won in all the most important ways. And then that thing got 1 million views. And it's like, huh, that's weird. But it's good because I saw that happen with a lot of Indigenous storytellers, including you, Jade, and Dallas, you know, of Indigenous Environmental Network, really getting things out there, you know, that was just wonderful. And I felt like all these Indigenous youth, like I met Dallas 10 years ago at a climate change conference in Washington, D.C., you know, and then all of a sudden it's like we've been preparing our whole lives to like be thrust into these leadership roles that we didn't ask for, we don't know how to do, but we're trying our best. And then all of a sudden you have all these Indigenous youth leading these movements, and it's like, and that's all enabled through the way that we frame our narrative. Just the fact that we said, you know, we are protectors, not protesters. That's Indigenous storytelling. And it's simple, but like one of our ancestors said, it doesn't take many words to speak the truth. You don't have to write a whole novel. You know, sometimes water is life is enough words to say it all. And so that kind of narrative crafting. And I think too, Ayana, the way that you opened this, the way that you, as a European American sister and accomplice of Indigenous Renaissance and resurrection, framed this story, how we started out, and you said this is about acknowledging that the United States is built upon the bedrock of genocide. You know, that's very powerful words that, if we take a moment to acknowledge them, can set all of us free from this insanity. And so I think that more and more just trusting in ourselves to pick up the camera, whether we're Indigenous to Turtle Island, or we're Indigenous to Europe, or we're Indigenous to Africa, or you're like me and you're kind of like a hybrid of all these places, then trusting yourself to tell your story. And the last thing I'll say about that is that practice makes perfect. You know, I started out just messing around with the camera about, you know, 6 years ago. And now I have a pretty lot better handle on how to create an evocative audio-visual story. And, you know, if we just keep practicing and putting it out there and having that courage to tell your story, no matter where you're from, inspires others to do the same. And they start thinking, oh man, what could I do? And so if we take the time to speak what's in our hearts, like me, having grown up with a lot of addiction, sexual abuse, you know, the whole 9 yards, divorce, you know, all my, you know, sad stories I leverage those stories all the time, Because you know what? A lot of women have gone through these things. A lot of men have too. And so if we have the courage to speak our story, and obviously we need to know what our story is first, which is a very painful process sometimes, to look at the truth of what you've been through. I thought I had a wonderful life for most of my life. I'm like, oh yeah, I had a great life. I had great parents, great school, just kind of glossed over all of the abuse that I had actually gone through because it was hard to feel. But if we have that courage to look at our life in earnest and forgive and heal and tell those stories, they can set people free. So I don't know if I answered the question exactly, but that's some of the things I think is that, you know, we are all meant to be storytellers. That's the most original way that we taught and we learned as human beings. So I'll just end with that.
Well, thank you both. And I just want to,
before you end this question, you know, back to the notion of questioning everything. I think that's something to do with media as well, especially around Standing Rock. I believe, I think I have these numbers right, don't quote me, but there are about 50 documentaries in the works about Standing Rock, and a handful of them are made by Indigenous peoples. So, you know, especially when it comes to what you see and what information you're taking in on social media or elsewhere, you know, just question, where is this coming from and who is writing this, making this? And yeah, just really be careful with that in the coming months, years, after everything that's happened up there.
Thank you, Jade. That is an incredibly important point, to question your sources, question where you're getting the information from, because there also can be infiltrators to the movements, and there can be people who are trying to send a completely different message to shatter groups and to create civil wars within the movement and horizontal hostility. So thank you so much for reminding us to question where we're getting our information, who's it coming from, who is telling this story. And I just want to, in terms of questioning, I want to let the listeners know that I'm going to ask one more question, and then please feel free to ask questions in the question tab button, and we'll be able to actually bring your face online so that you can ask Jade and Lila directly. And yeah, so everyone can engage in that way. So the last question, Jade and Lila, that I want to ask you is, well, first of all, I mean, through both of your work, you bring attention to the fact that despite hundreds of years of oppression and silencing, the wealth and diversity of Indigenous nations are very much still present and alive. And I'm wondering now, what does reclaiming one's indigeneity and building resiliency mean in a modern world engulfed in technology, capitalism, and resource extraction?
So my grandma's talking on the phone in the other room, if you hear a cute grandma voice. But I think this is a huge question, and I could talk about it for so long, but I'm going to try and whittle it down to a few points. Number one, we need to reverse our understanding of primitivity and sophistication, because a lot of the reason why a lot of Indigenous peoples have assimilated is because we have bought into the idea that we are primitive as we are in our tribal state, I guess you could say, and that the Western way is sophisticated and advanced. Nothing is further from the truth. Think about it. In the Western world, you live in houses, I'm in one right now, that is full of carcinogenic materials. There's really nothing more primitive than living in something that kills you. Furthermore, we are also, in this primitive Western society, completely dependent on monocrop agriculture, which is about the stupidest kind of agriculture you could possibly do. No offense, but it's just stupid. Because you have a very narrow genetic pool, which is incredibly susceptible to disease. And we keep trying to overcome these pests and pesticides and outbeat them and out genetically modify them, but we're running out of bullets and we are asking for a food shortage. Nothing is more primitive than this food system we are dependent on. And all of it is being decided for us by a handful of corporations. What's another primitive thing? Well, the fact that we are constantly medicating people with things that make them more sick, and that we have completely forgotten that our bodies are designed to hold the sacred Great Spirit to heal others. We have completely lost touch with our inherent healing abilities through song, through prayer, and through holding spirit within us for others. And so nothing is more primitive than a healthcare system that perpetually keeps its population in a state of unhealth. It's incredibly short-sighted and primitive. And the fourth major primitive thing is that we have completely forgotten about long-term thinking. We are so primitive that we are about to shoot ourselves in the foot. We have basically poisoned our own pond that we live in. And so our species, if you will, as a Western organism, is on its way out the door very quickly. Now let's go to the advanced topic of our indigenous technology. And lately I've been spelling technology TEK, traditional ecological knowledge technology. That this technology is so advanced, and every single colonizer worked very hard to downplay how sophisticated these tribes were, because their colonization and destruction of these peoples depended on the justification that they were savage, right? So anything sophisticated, anything advanced, you want to destroy as quickly as possible, like the libraries full of codices in the Mayan and Aztec civilizations. Anything that's advanced, you want to get out of the way. Or the fact that we actually had hundreds of thousands of horses in this continent at the point of Columbus's arrival, but horses were deemed as things of civilization. So the Spanish said, oh, no, we brought all these horses. That's how you got horses. So it's very important to understand that to reclaim our indigeneity is not to go back in the past or to live. That's what I don't like about the primitive skills gatherings, which are really cool. I totally get the idea of it. But to call these skills primitive is just a little bit misunderstanding the point, which is that to be able to live in harmony and to hear the voices of nature doesn't mean you have to give up sanitation. It doesn't mean you have to give up a nice place to live. Our civilizations had beautiful and still have beautiful architecture that is made out of 100% natural materials that keeps it warm in the winter and cold in the summer. And so you don't have to give up anything to re-indigenize yourself. And that goes for traditional European indigenous knowledge too, which was destroyed. So anyways, long story short, I think that that's the big myth that we have to debunk ASAP, is this idea that indigenous peoples were primitive and Western society is advanced. It's actually the complete opposite. And we are so primitive in this society that we are willing to, it's almost like cannibalism. except for we're eating our own kids. Sorry, I don't mean to be so graphic, but like it's really something we need to take a look at, is our definition of primitivity and sophistication. But also the last thing I want to say is, as a almost half European woman, I did go back to Europe. I went back to Europe and I went to the sacred mountains there and I prayed, and you would not believe how powerful she is. She is so powerful. And she is so precious and beautiful. And she has so much to help us remember. And she cradled me in her arms in the same way that my sacred mountains here cradle me in their arms. And so no matter where your ancestors are from, I would highly recommend either going to these places, which is kind of a privileged thing to be able to do. Not everyone can do it. I'm privileged to have been able to go, but to remember them and to pray to them and to honor them. I know a lot of European Americans, including some in my family, want nothing to do with Europe. They think it's a horrible place where there was kings and serfs and, but it's so much deeper than that. They found an effigy in German soil that was 40,000 years old of a woman, a sacred woman, and it represented fertility and it represented the sanctity of the feminine. And so this is how long Europe has been praying to honor the earth. And that thin wall of time that dominates our understanding of Europe is one big trick. It's not the truth of who we are. And so I'll stop there. Like I said, I could go on, and I tend to go on and on. So sorry about that. But I think really honoring where we come from. And I think it's a big stretch and a big ask to tell European Americans to go back to Europe. I think that's a little bit, first of all, not very nice, even though they haven't always been very nice to Indigenous peoples. That doesn't mean we can be mean back, So, and second of all, it just might not be feasible. That's a lot of boats and plane tickets. And then once they get there, what are they going to do? So, in that case, what does it mean to be a transplant? That's a whole another question that I am praying to understand now. But I think it means honoring and loving yourself, because there's a lot of European American shame and guilt, which is, I understand why we feel that, but it's only hindering us, and it's only depressing us and suppressing us as servants of Creator. But also honoring the Indigenous peoples in our backyard and creating as much equity as possible. I went to California last week. One last thing. And they were talking about, I said, did you know in the late 1800s you could sell the scalp of a Native American in Sacramento for $5? And they said, no, I didn't know that. I said, did you know in California that they're trying to raise the dam, which will destroy 50 sacred sites of the Winnemem Wintu? No, I had no idea. So these are ways that I think we can reclaim our own indigeneity. If I went to Europe as a Native American woman and I found all these Indigenous peoples having a hard time in Europe, I would want to lift them up. I would want to put my life in service to that, because that's, and at the same time know that this earth is holding me too. So anyways, I'll stop there. Thank you for letting me go on and on there.
Jade, oh yeah, please.
Oh yeah, thanks. Well, Lyla really covered a lot of the big picture stuff and the the personal work that we all have to do. But I think I just want to echo that and just say, last August I moved back home. I moved back to New Mexico. I was living in Colorado, and that was probably the best decision I've made in a long, just ever. I'll just go with that, because I really feel like I won't ever leave again. I mean, I leave a lot for work, but I think being there and having my, living where my roots are is just this really powerful thing that nourishes me. And I know that lots of folks don't have that same privilege of going back to their ancestral homeland. So I think, doing what you can, what is in grasp to learn about your ancestry, to learn about, who you are, where you come from. I think that is a part of reclaiming indigeneity, and goes hand in hand with this this learning to love yourself, as Lyla mentioned. I think in moving back home, what I really found was this profound sense of groundedness and this profound sense of love for who I am and where I come from, and now I can work from that place. I can work from this place of self-love and groundedness. And so for me, that's what reclaiming my indigeneity and reclaiming who I am has looked like in the past year or so.
Thank you, both of you, so much for sharing some of your personal stories and experiences and being able to speak to these questions with such multi-dimensionality. It was such a joy and perplexing to question everything and try to understand these really difficult topics from many angles. And I'd like to now open up the questions to the viewers, and I'm looking at the Q&A, and I am going to ask Dorte to, I'm going to promote her to a panelist, and would love for you to ask your question to Jade and Lyla. Looks like it's working right now. Hi.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for this incredible conversation. I've been moved to tears from your words, so thank you. The question that I have is, given that so much is at stake right now and that this webinar series is really centered on women who are bonded in action, I was curious to know what, Lyla and Jade, your thoughts are about what are the biggest challenges and also the gifts that that is being a woman in this particular time. Like, what does it mean to you, and whether as Indigenous women or just a woman on planet Earth right now? I would just love to hear your thoughts about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dorte.
Okay, I guess I'll go ahead. Wow, I think that's a very vital question, sister, and thanks for joining. I never done a webinar before. It's kind of crazy. This is cool. Nice to connect with all of you. Thanks for watching. What is the challenge and what is the gift of being a woman? That's a really well-phrased question, and the challenge is we live in a world that's constantly trying to destroy women in every way. The Cree have a proverb, and it is that a nation is not defeated until the hearts of the women are on the ground. And they said this because they knew that the women upheld everything. We are the root of life. We can birth human bodies out of our vagina. Like, that's amazing. That's a miracle. And the labor, literally the labor. My younger sister was in labor for 4 days before Aze was born. That love, that dedication, and then you nurse. You literally your child becomes you, becomes the milk that flows through you. You are the root of every single human being walking around right now. And so the Cree were very intelligent. They knew that until the women were defeated, the nation would be fine. And so this is why the dark spiritual forces attack women first. They work through armies, they work through policies, but this is really just pawns of a larger dark force, spiritual force that is actively trying to destroy women at every opportunity. One of the most common is through rape. And so the reason why rape is so effective is because 99% of the time, women blame themselves for it, as I did for more rapes than I can even count. I used to be an alcoholic, so I was always in the wrong place at the wrong time, getting taken advantage of. And I even got raped when I was sober. But I blamed myself so deeply for the rapes that I didn't even know I had been raped. I thought it was just normal and I was just being a bad person or whatever. And so if we believe we're bad, then we're not allowed to fully step into who we are. And we're living life at 10%. Because I always said, I can't do that. I've been raped. I'm a tainted woman. Or not I've been raped, but I cooperated with these weird things that happened to my body. And, you know, how could I be a speaker for justice, a speaker for truth, a servant of the Creator if I have desecrated my most important part of myself that gives life? So this is an active warfare on every woman, and you'll be very hard-pressed to find a woman who has not been raped in some manner. And I define rape as have to, not want to. We do something because we think we have to, not because we truly want to. And so long story short, I think that that's the challenge. What is the blessing? What is the gift? The gift is that we get to rise up. We get to love ourselves in the face of the rape. We get to honor ourselves in the face of the rape and say, you know what? You never touched me. You never touched my spirit. They might have raped me more times than I can count, but you know what? I remain unscathed. At the end of the day, they don't stop me from doing what I came here to do. And we can lead our people, and we can bring that women's leadership back, not for women, but for life, because we carry life. So I'll stop there.
Yeah, I'll give a short answer too. I think, you know, I think throughout this call we've been answering the very first question, which was, how does colonialism endure? And one of the ways it endures is by this concept that women need to compete, or women need to be pitted against each other. And I certainly grew up with this idea. I don't know, for some reason it was just in my head, you know, in elementary school and in middle school, and it was tough and it hurt, and it I think it's amazing now to realize that that's false, that I don't have to look at women as competition or anything like that, or be jealous or anything like that. I think, you know, celebrating women and really, really honoring sisterhood and really building sisterhood is one of the greatest blessings we have as women right now. I can't tell you, from meeting Ayana or Lila or whoever, you know, all the women who have been on this series, just amazing things have come out of trusting each other and uplifting one another. And I think that's just something we as women have like an amazing, have as an amazing blessing. So yeah, teaching our young girls that you know, there's no competition here. It's really about sisterhood. That's one way another way to decolonize.
Beautiful answers, both of you. Thank you. And thank you so much, Dorte, for coming on and asking a question. We are coming near the end of this webinar. If there is another question, and if Lyla and Jade are open to answering another one, I'm happy to bring another person online. Otherwise, I would love for Lyla and Jade, if you'd let, oh, two people raise their hands, interesting, okay. Still learning this program as well.
Why don't we take a stack and let them both ask, and then Lyla and I can, I don't know, we can decide which one we want to answer. Maybe they're specific to one of us, so.
Perfect.
While you're figuring that out, let me just say that it's a huge honor, Jade, to do this with you. Thank you for being my friend and my sister on this journey.
Thank you, Lyla. Thank you, Ayana. Dorothy, I should say, for your question, and everyone else who's been on this webinar.
And yes, and it was, there's been a lot of questions asked and answered, and I think this is a good place to give you both space to have some closing remarks, and also beyond remarks, how people in the audience can support both of your work, where they could find you and your work, where you'll be working next, speaking next, and just helping to build this community of resilience, love, and support for both of you.
So did the last two questions, are those not happening? Or?
I didn't see them pop up. If you did you? I haven't.
Oh no, and I don't know how to add anyone in, but I can begin with the closing remarks if that's where we're headed. Oh,
that'd
okay.
be great.
Okay, well, yeah, thank you, Akehet, to everyone again. And like I said at the top of the call, webinar, I'm currently in New Orleans, Louisiana, doing some storytelling or collecting some stories on the Bayou Bridge pipeline. After this, I'm headed towards San Antonio and then Marfa to do some storytelling on the Trans-Pecos pipeline. These are all projects of Energy Transfer Partners, which is the company, the parent company of the Dakota Access Pipeline. So as IEN, the Indigenous Environmental Network, that's exactly what we are. We're a network. So coming out here is our way of continuing to support and show love to other Indigenous communities that need it. Yeah, headed en route back to Santa Fe, gonna be in Texas. Yeah, I think, IEN, Indigenous Environmental Network, is a great place to show support, because they help uplift other communities and the work and the resistance that are happening all across this continent, as well as up in Canada and those treaty lands, and down south in both Mexico and South America. So they really have a far reach. I'm drawing a blank. Our big thing, after Standing Rock, we organized this Native Nations Rise March in DC, and hopefully some of y'all were able to see that. That happened like 2 weeks ago in Washington, DC, and the big message there was about, it's not just about Standing Rock, or it's not just about the Homa here in Louisiana, but almost all Indigenous communities are facing some kind of threat. And so we really need to think about, Indigenous rights and how we can uplift them all over and learn about them. I think we hear this word treaties and we hear this idea of sovereignty, and we don't really know what that means. So I think, learning those concepts and learning, what those things are. Again, the education piece, it's really big. Supporting our messages that, Indigenous rights equal ecological balance, Indigenous rights equal climate justice, because they do, like Lyla said. It's not primitive stuff, it's really advanced knowledge that we have and we need to preserve. So I'll end there, and thank you again so much.
Well, first of all, just thank you, everyone. I love all of you. I love all 72 of you, and the ones who left early, I love them too. Prayers are with them. And I look forward to continuing to building this community of Indigenous movements, as well as alliances with quote unquote non-Indigenous groups, individuals, organizations. I think that what Jade touched on is probably what I would say if we're kind of closing with what can you do to jump on board with this resurrection of Indigenous health, is just realize that Standing Rock is everywhere. It's everywhere, and Standing Rock was a beautiful manifestation of one issue. And take the time to research whose original homeland you are dwelling in, and go find them and ask them how you can support, if at all. Maybe they don't want support, but maybe they do. Maybe they really need help. Like if you're in the Bay Area, the Ohlone people, they are still there. People think, oh, they're extinct. No, they're still there, and they need a lot of help. Help that is on their terms, instead of, I know it's best for you, let me save your world, which all of us fall into from time to time, myself included. But if we could take the time to listen and say, what do you need? Is there any way I can be of service? That not only restores health to Indigenous nations, it restores health to the soul of this whole continent. And that was Martin Luther King's major point. This isn't for African Americans. This is for the soul of all of us, to restore dignity to this entire land and the people who live on it. We do have the ability to reverse the legacy of colonialism. We do have the ability to do things differently and do it right this time. And that involves doing something that's so fun, and something that a lot of you are probably already engaged in, which is lifting up and honoring and supporting, and at the very least withdrawing our oppression. Maybe we don't have to go out and help the Ho-Chunk or help the Homa or help the Ramapo Lenape or whatever tribe it is you're next to, but at least revoke the ways in which we continue to oppress these nations. But also I would just say that I put 2 links in the chat of 2 things that I'm in the midst of doing. One is a community-based curriculum with about 30 Diné people, and we're creating a summer school it's called Diné Benan Tiendo Ho'ah, which means the people's teaching and learning. So if you want to donate to that, you're welcome to. The other thing is the Black Hills Unity Concert, which is very much in alignment with this. It's a true partnership between Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples, which has its learning curves. We've definitely learned the hard way what not to do and what to do. But the basic premise of this is prayer, and I'm going to be organizing it this year like I did 2 years ago. So if you want to donate to that, we have a huge goal of 45K. We probably won't make it, but that's one thing you can help too. But I think most of all, as we've touched on, just love yourself deeply, and forgiveness. I cannot stress forgiveness enough. Forgiveness doesn't mean that what's happened or what is happening is okay. It means we choose to work with a loving heart for all things. And we forgive as we are dismantling colonialism at the same exact time, that we do it with love in our hearts for ourselves and for the colonizers. And so in that spirit, I just want to say I forgive. I forgive the atrocities that have happened on this continent, and I say I love you, and I don't hold it against you. And I look forward to working with you to reverse the legacy with joy in our hearts and a prayer on our lips. So just say that. Thanks, everyone.
Wow, thank you so much, Jade and Lila. I'm sending you so much love and gratitude through these webinar interwebs right now. Wish I was giving you both a bear hug in person, but this has been absolutely incredible. And I want to thank all of the viewers who tuned in today. And please look up the resources in this chat. I will also share them on social media, the ones that Jade and Lila have posted about, so that we can continue to support people on the front lines, grassroots organizations, and the communities who are really fighting the fight for all of us. And I would also like to thank Spirit Weavers Gathering, and please stay tuned on April 6th. Our next webinar is Dismantling Systemic White Supremacy, so please tune in for that as well. Love everyone, and speak with you all soon. Bye.
I'll go on it.